The great halls of the Zenthari royal palace shimmered under the soft glow of floating crystal lights. The air was heavy with tension as thousands of Zenthari nobles, warriors, and officials gathered in silence. Their golden eyes glowed dimly in the twilight of the ceremonial chamber. At the center of the grand stage stood Princess Zyra, dressed in a flowing silver robe, her violet skin radiant under the palace lights. But all eyes were not on her. They were fixed on the man standing beside her, Commander Adrian Voss, a human from Earth. The two stood hand in hand before the Zenthari High Council, an assembly of the oldest and most powerful leaders in the Empire. At their center sat Chancellor Verith, his long blue robes embroidered with the symbols of Zenthari tradition. His aged face was unreadable as he stared at the couple before him. Zyra inhaled deeply, her heart pounding. She knew what was coming. Princess Zyra. Chancellor Verith's voice echoed in the hall, filled with disapproval. You have chosen to break our traditions. You have chosen to wed an outsider, a human. Gasps filled the room. Whispers spread like wildfire. Zyra lifted her chin. Yes, she said firmly. I have chosen Commander Adrian Voss as my husband. Not as an outsider, but as my equal. Adrian remained silent, his expression calm, but he could feel the weight of 1,000 stares pressing against him. He had faced battles, led troops into war, and survived against impossible odds. But standing here, in the heart of an alien empire, surrounded by people who saw him as an intruder, was a different kind of challenge. The Chancellor's golden eyes narrowed. The Zenthari have never went beyond our race. For centuries, our traditions have kept our empire strong, and now you dare to cast them aside. Zyra's grip on Adrian's hand tightened. Strength does not come from isolation, she said. It comes from unity, from understanding. Adrian has proven himself to be a warrior, a leader, and a man of honor. A voice suddenly rang out from the crowd. A human cannot understand the ways of the Zenthari. Heads turned toward General Tarn, one of the most respected war leaders of the Empire. His tall, armored frame was tense with anger. They are weak, short-lived, and reckless. Our ancestors would never allow such a union. Adrian finally spoke, his voice steady but strong. With all due respect, General, strength is not measured by blood alone. It is measured by the choices we make, the battles we fight, and the honor we uphold. General Karn scoffed. And what honor do humans know? Your people are young. Your worlds are still in chaos. What wisdom do you bring to our empire? Adrian met his gaze without fear. The wisdom that comes from survival, he said. From standing up against impossible odds. From uniting people, even when they are different. The chamber fell silent. Some Zenthari nobles exchanged uncertain glances. Others shook their heads. But before the Chancellor could respond, Zyra took a step forward. This is not just about tradition, she said. This is about the future. The Zenthari Empire stands at a crossroads. We can remain trapped in the past, fearing change, or we can embrace a future where we grow stronger, together. The Chancellor exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. And do you believe, Princess, that the people will accept this future? Zyra's voice was firm. Not all at once. But in time, they will see what I see, that this union is not a weakness. It is a strength. The Chancellor's gaze shifted to Adrian. And you, human, do you truly understand what this means? This is not just a marriage. It is a challenge to everything the Zenthari have known. Adrian held his ground. I know, he said, and I do not take this lightly. I do not ask to be accepted without proving myself, but I will prove myself, not through words, but through actions. For a long moment, the Chancellor was silent. Then, slowly, he stood from his seat. Very well. His voice was grave. The Council will not stop this union. Another wave of gasps spread through the chamber. General Xarn's fists clenched in frustration, but he did not speak. But know this, the Chancellor continued, his golden eyes locking onto Adrian's. "Your presence in this empire will not be welcomed by all. There are those who see this as a betrayal, and there are those who will act against you." Adrian nodded. "I understand." The Chancellor turned his gaze to Xyra. "You have chosen your path, Princess. You must now live with the consequences." Xyra did not hesitate. "I am ready." With those final words, the ceremony continued, but though the marriage was officially recognized, it was clear the battle for acceptance had only just begun. As Adrian and Xyra left the grand hall, the whispers behind them turned to shadows moving in secret. Eyes filled with anger watched from the dark corners of the chamber. The Pure Dominion, a hidden faction of Zenthari loyalists who believed in keeping their traditions untouched, had already begun their plans. And their first target, Commander Adrian Voss. The palace was quieter than usual. The golden towers of the Zenthari royal city gleamed under the twin moons, their light casting long shadows across the grand walkways. But beneath the beauty of the night, danger was stirring. Adrian Voss stood on the balcony of his new quarters, overlooking the city below. The air was crisp, yet heavy with tension. He had fought in countless battles, led warriors through impossible odds, and faced death more times than he could count. But this was different. Here, he was not a soldier. He was an outsider. The ceremony had ended, but the war for acceptance had just begun. A kingdom divided. Inside the royal palace, Princess Styra faced the Zenthari High Council once more. Unlike the grand halls of their wedding, this meeting was held in the Chamber of Sovereigns, a place where only the most powerful voices of the empire gathered. Seated in a circular formation, the council members watched her with cold, unreadable expressions. Among them sat Chancellor Verith, his hands folded as he studied the young princess. "You have forced the empire into an uneasy path, Princess," the Chancellor finally said. "Your decision has awakened old fears. The people do not trust humans, and many believe your marriage to Commander Voss is a mistake." Zyra remained calm, though her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "The people fear what they do not understand," she replied. "But fear is not an excuse to stop progress. We must move forward, or we will be left behind." A low murmur spread through the chamber. General Xarn, the warrior who had spoken against Adrian during the ceremony, leaned forward. His deep voice carried a warning. "You speak of progress, Princess, but you have invited weakness into our empire. The humans are reckless. They do not understand our ways. And yet, you have made one of them your consort." Zyra's gaze did not waver. "Adrian is not weak. He is a warrior, a leader, someone who has earned my trust and my love. Love is not enough to rule an empire." Xarn said coldly, "The people will never accept him." "They will, in time," Zyra insisted, "but only if we lead them." Chancellor Verith exhaled deeply. "And what of the Pure Dominion?" A silence fell over the chamber. The Pure Dominion, a secret faction within the empire. Loyalists who believed in Zenthari supremacy. They had operated in the shadows for centuries, ensuring that no outside influence could corrupt their traditions. Now, Xyra and Adrian had become their greatest threat. Zyra squared her shoulders. "The Pure Dominion is a disease in our empire. They seek to divide us. If we allow them to control the people through fear, then we are already defeated." The Chancellor studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You have made your decision, Princess, but do not be blind to the dangers ahead." Zyra knew his words were not just advice. They were a warning. The Pure Dominion would not stand by and watch as she changed the empire. They would strike first. A dangerous invitation. That night, Adrian received an unexpected message, a summons. It was from General Xarn. The invitation was clear. A meeting at the Warriors' Circle, a sacred ground where only the strongest warriors of the Zenthari were allowed to enter. Adrian knew what this meant. This was not a simple conversation. This was a challenge. You're not seriously considering going, Tyra said as Adrian prepared to leave. Adrian fastened his combat vest. If I refuse, they'll say I'm a coward. If I go, at least I get a chance to prove myself. Syra's golden eyes filled with concern. The warrior's circle is not a place for politics. It is where warriors settle disputes. If Karn has called you there, it is because he wants to test you. Then I'll give him an answer, Adrian said. Gzira exhaled sharply, knowing she couldn't stop him. Be careful, she whispered. Adrian placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I will. Then, without another word, he stepped into the darkness. The warrior's circle. The warrior's circle was an ancient arena, carved into the heart of the royal city. The stone walls were engraved with the names of Zenthari champions who had proven their strength through combat. Adrian entered the circle, where General Tarn stood waiting. Around them, dozens of Zenthari warriors gathered, their glowing eyes watching silently. You came, Zarn said, his voice filled with challenge. You invited me, Adrian replied. Zarn stepped forward, his towering frame casting a long shadow. You are not Zenthari, he said. You do not share our blood. And yet, the princess has chosen you. Adrian met his gaze. That seems to be a problem for a lot of people. Zarn's lip curled. Then prove you are worthy. A warrior stepped forward and handed Zarn a Zenthari dueling blade, a curved weapon used only in battle rituals. Another warrior approached Adrian and offered him the same. Adrian hesitated for only a moment before taking the weapon. The message was clear: fight or leave in disgrace. The warriors around them fell silent as Tarn took his stance. Adrian tightened his grip on the blade, feeling its unfamiliar weight. You are human, Zarn said. You do not belong here. Adrian narrowed his eyes. Then I guess I'll have to change that. And with that, the duel began. A shadow in the dark. As Adrian and Tarn clashed in the warrior's circle, hidden figures moved through the palace corridors. The pure dominion had waited long enough. In the darkness, a group of masked Zenthari infiltrators moved swiftly toward the royal chambers. Their mission was clear: eliminate Princess Syra. The clash of blades echoed through the warrior's circle. The gathered Zenthari warriors watched in silence as Adrian Voss and General Zarn dueled beneath the glow of the twin moons. Zarn was faster, stronger, and trained in the art of Zenthari combat since birth. He moved with precision, his curved blade slicing through the air with deadly accuracy. Adrian, however, was different. He fought with human unpredictability, a mix of Earth's battle techniques and raw survival instinct. Every strike from Zarn was countered. Every attempt to overpower Adrian was met with quick footwork and brutal efficiency. The warriors around them had expected Adrian to fall within moments. But now, as the duel stretched on, a new feeling spread among them. Doubt. This human was no ordinary outsider. And then something strange happened. As Adrian dodged another attack, his blade scraped against the arena floor. And for a brief moment, the stone beneath him glowed, a faint, pulsing light that flickered like an ancient heartbeat. The crowd gasped. Even Zarn hesitated. What was that? One of the warriors whispered. But Adrian had no time to think. Zarn lunged forward, forcing him back into the fight. Yet the thought lingered in his mind. Why had the arena itself reacted to him? A silent attack. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Princess Syra sat alone in her private chambers, unaware of the danger creeping closer. The royal guards had been stationed outside her door, but they were no match for the pure Dominion assassins moving through the shadows. Cloaked in dark armor, their forms blended into the walls as they advanced with deadly precision. Syra exhaled slowly, lost in thought. Her heart was still heavy with worry for Adrian. The council did not trust him. The warriors did not respect him. And now, enemies lurked in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment had come. With a silent signal, the assassins moved. The first slipped behind the nearest guard, a plasma blade emerging from his wrist. Before the guard could react, thud. He collapsed, lifeless. The second assassin took out the remaining guard with equal silence. Now nothing stood between them and their target. They stepped toward Xyra's chamber door. But just as they reached for the control panel, the palace lights flickered. For a brief moment, the entire structure hummed with an eerie energy. A ripple passed through the walls, like a wave of unseen force. The assassins froze. Something was wrong. Then, suddenly, boom! The palace doors burst open as a shockwave of blue light exploded outward, sending the assassins crashing into the walls. The very structure of the palace shifted, glowing symbols appearing on its surface. Xyra jumped to her feet, eyes wide in shock. What is happening? The assassins, now injured but still alive, scrambled to their feet. Their mission was not yet over. They rushed forward, only to be met by a wall of energy that surged up between them and the princess. A barrier, a force that had not existed moments ago. And then Xyra saw it. The same strange glow that had flickered beneath Adrian's feet in the warrior's circle was now spreading through the palace itself. And deep within her mind, something whispered, "The awakening has begun." The duel's end. Back in the arena, Adrian and Xarn's duel raged on. But now, both warriors had noticed it. The arena floor was pulsing with a strange light. Every time Adrian moved, the energy reacted, following his footsteps like an ancient force recognizing him. Xarn growled in frustration. "What is this trickery?" "I was hoping you'd tell me," Adrian shot back. Suddenly, the entire arena shook. The carvings on the stone walls lit up, as if responding to Adrian's presence. Gasps filled the crowd. Even the most hardened warriors took a step back. Xarn hesitated for the first time. His instincts screamed that something unnatural was happening. But Adrian saw something different. This wasn't an attack. This was something old, something hidden, and it was waking up. Before anyone could react, a pillar of blue energy shot up from the center of the arena, reaching into the sky. The air became thick with power. Then, a voice, not human, not Scifi, but something far older, whispered through the air. "The time has come." And with those words, the light exploded outward. Adrian, Xarn, and every warrior in the arena were thrown to the ground as the ancient force surged through the city. The Scifi Empire had just been changed forever. The aftermath. When Adrian regained consciousness, the arena was silent. The energy had vanished, but something felt different. Xarn groaned, pushing himself up. For the first time, his golden eyes held no hatred, only uncertainty. "What have you done?" he whispered. Adrian didn't know the answer, but deep inside, he felt it. This wasn't just an accident. His presence in the Scifi Empire had unlocked something buried in history, something that had been waiting. As he looked around, the warriors stared at him with awe instead of resentment. For the first time since arriving, Adrian Voss was no longer just an outsider. He was something more. But before he could process what had happened, a Scifi guard ran into the arena, breathless. "My lords, an assassination attempt on Princess Xyra." Adrian's blood ran cold. Without another word, he sprinted toward the palace. Unaware that this was only the beginning, Adrian ran through the palace corridors, his heart pounding. The words of the guard echoed in his mind. An assassination attempt on Xyra. He pushed his body forward, ignoring the pain from the duel. Nothing mattered except reaching her. The palace was in chaos. Guards rushed in different directions, shouting orders. Some carried injured soldiers, their armor scorched by some unknown force. The air smelled of burnt metal and energy discharge. Adrian reached the royal chamber and found the door partially destroyed. The walls around it shimmered with strange glowing symbols, pulsating with a faint blue light. It was the same light he had seen in the arena. He stepped inside. And there, in the center of the room, stood Zyra, untouched, unharmed. A shimmering energy barrier surrounded her, flickering like a protective shield. On the floor, the bodies of 3 assassins lay motionless, their weapons melted beyond recognition. Zyra looked up, her golden eyes filled with both relief and shock. "Adrian," she whispered. Adrian rushed to her side. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No, but something happened." Her hands trembled as she looked at the flickering barrier around her. This was not me." Adrian glanced at the markings on the walls. "It's the same energy from the arena." Zyra nodded. "And it reacted to you there, just as it reacted to me here." She took a deep breath. "Adrian, this is no accident. Something ancient is awakening." The Chancellor's revelation. Moments later, the Zenthari High Council arrived. Chancellor Vereth led them, his face tense with concern. The other council members stood behind him, whispering among themselves. "What happened here?" the Chancellor asked, his eyes scanning the room. "The Pure Dominion tried to assassinate the princess," Adrian said, his voice firm. "But something stopped them." Zyra nodded. "A force protected me. A power I don't understand." The Chancellor's expression darkened. He stepped forward, studying the ancient symbols on the walls. "These markings, I have seen them before." Adrian and Sarah exchanged a look. "You know what this is?" Adrian asked. Chancellor Vereth hesitated before finally speaking. "There is an old legend, one that was buried long ago. It speaks of an ancient energy, hidden deep within our world, waiting for the right moment to awaken. But the legend also tells of 2 souls, one Zenthari and one outsider, who would trigger its return." He turned to Adrian. "This energy recognized you in the arena, and now it has recognized Zyra." Zyra's breath caught. "You mean this was meant to happen?" The Chancellor nodded gravely. "Perhaps. But if the legend is true, then this power is dangerous. It has been hidden for a reason." Adrian frowned. "And now, it's waking up." The Chancellor exhaled. "Yes, and the Pure Dominion will do everything to stop it." The Pure Dominion strikes again. Far away, in the darkest part of the city, the leaders of the Pure Dominion gathered in a hidden chamber. The failed assassination had angered them, but it had also confirmed something important. The prophecy was real. An elderly Zenthari, cloaked in dark robes, stepped forward. His name was Lord Varix, the true leader of the Pure Dominion. "Our ancestors buried this power for a reason," he said coldly. "If it returns, it will bring change. And change will bring the fall of our empire." A younger warrior stepped forward. "Then we must act quickly. The princess and the human must be eliminated before they unlock the full power." Varix nodded. "Prepare the warriors. This time, we do not send assassins." His eyes burned with conviction. "This time, we go to war. A desperate escape." Back at the palace, Adrian and Zyra stood at the Chancellor's private chamber. The council had agreed. Staying in the palace was too dangerous. If the Pure Dominion had already attempted one assassination, they would try again. "We need to leave," Adrian said. "They'll come back stronger." Zyra hesitated. "But this is my home. If I run now..." Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't running. This is surviving. If this ancient power is waking up because of us, we need to understand it. And we can't do that if we're dead." Zyra sighed. She knew he was right. The Chancellor handed them a small data tablet. "There is a place, a hidden sanctuary. It is located in the ruins of the First Dynasty, deep within the Forbidden Wastes." Zyra's eyes widened. "The First Dynasty, but that place has been abandoned for centuries." The Chancellor nodded. "And that is why it is the safest place for you now." Adrian took the tablet. "Then that's where we go." The Chancellor gave him a firm nod. May the stars guide you." And with that, Adrian and Syra slipped out of the palace, disappearing into the night. The journey begins. The forbidden wastes stretched endlessly beneath the alien sky. Adrian and Syra moved through the rocky terrain, their cloaks wrapped tightly around them to block the harsh winds. Behind them, the golden towers of the palace grew smaller in the distance. Ahead of them, the ruins of the First Dynasty awaited. Neither of them knew what they would find there. But one thing was clear: their destiny had only just begun. And the fate of the entire empire rested on what they would uncover next. The forbidden wastes stretched endlessly under the twin moons of Zenthara. The cold wind howled through the rocky terrain, carrying whispers of the past. Adrian and Syra moved carefully over the uneven ground, their cloaks wrapped tightly around them. Behind them, the golden towers of the palace were now distant shadows. Ahead, barely visible in the moonlight, stood the ruins of the First Dynasty, a place abandoned for centuries. "This place looks untouched," Adrian said, scanning the massive stone structures ahead. Syra nodded. "The First Dynasty was the earliest civilization of my people, but something happened long ago. The records say they disappeared, leaving nothing but these ruins." Adrian tightened his grip on his weapon. "And we're walking right into it." Syra glanced at him, her golden eyes filled with determination. "If this place holds the truth about the ancient power, we need to find it before the pure Dominion does." They stepped forward into the ruins, a city lost in time. As they entered the ancient site, Adrian felt an uneasy presence in the air. The ruins were massive. Tall pillars carved with strange symbols, cracked staircases leading to nowhere, and half-buried statues of forgotten rulers. But the most mysterious thing was the silence. No wind, no movement, just stillness. "It feels like this place is waiting," Adrian muttered. Syra traced her fingers over a wall covered in old symbols. The markings glowed faintly at her touch, sending a pulse of energy through the ground. Adrian stepped back. "That's the same glow from the palace." Syra's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, this place is alive." Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted. The symbols on the walls flared with light, and a deep rumbling sound echoed through the ruins. Adrian grabbed Syra's arm. "What did you just do?" Before she could answer, the floor collapsed beneath them. The chamber below. Adrian and Syra tumbled down a dark tunnel, landing on a stone platform deep beneath the surface. Dust filled the air as the passage above them sealed shut, trapping them inside. Syra coughed and stood up, looking around. "Where are we?" Adrian scanned the massive underground chamber. The walls were covered in glowing symbols, and at the center stood a large stone pedestal. Floating above it was a crystal sphere, pulsing with soft blue light. Syra's breath caught. "This is a memory core." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "A what?" She stepped forward, her fingers trembling as she reached for the crystal. "The First Dynasty stored their history inside these cores. If this one still works, it might tell us the truth about the power we awakened." Adrian watched as Syra touched the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, the entire chamber came to life. A holographic figure appeared before them, a Zenthari elder dressed in royal robes. His eyes, though ancient, burned with wisdom. He spoke, his voice echoing through the chamber. "If you are hearing this, then the time has come." Syra held her breath. "This is a message from the past." The elder continued. "Long ago, our people discovered a force beyond imagination, a power that could shape the stars, bend reality, and bring life or destruction. We called it the celestial essence." Hadrian clenched his fists. "That sounds dangerous." "We tried to control it," the elder said, "but we failed. The power was too great. It consumed us. And so we did the only thing we could. We sealed it away, deep within the heart of Zenthara." Syra's eyes widened. The power wasn't lost. It was hidden. The elder's expression turned grim. The seal was designed to remain forever. But if you are seeing this message, then the seal has begun to break. Adrian and Sci-Fi exchanged a look. They had awakened something that was never meant to return. The elder's final words sent chills down their spines. Beware, for if the celestial essence falls into the wrong hands, it will bring an end to all things. And with that, the hologram vanished. The chamber fell silent. The pure dominion arrives. Before Adrian or Sci-Fi could react, the ground trembled once more. But this time, it wasn't from the ruins. It was footsteps. Heavy, armored footsteps. Adrian grabbed Sci-Fi and pulled her into the shadows just as a squad of pure dominion warriors entered the chamber. At the front stood Lord Verix, his dark robes flowing behind him. His eyes locked onto the crystal sphere. "So," he murmured, "the ancient power is real after all." One of his warriors stepped forward. "What are your orders, my lord?" Verix smiled coldly. "Destroy the memory core. If the Empire learns the truth, it will weaken our control. The power must belong to us alone." Adrian's jaw tightened. "We can't let them do this." Sci-Fi nodded. "If they control the celestial essence, they could rule, or destroy, everything." Adrian took a deep breath. He had come to Zenthora as an outsider, but now he had a purpose. He turned to Sci-Fi. "Are you ready?" She met his gaze, determination shining in her golden eyes. "Always." And together, they stepped out of the shadows. Adrian and Sci-Fi stepped out of the shadows, their presence no longer a secret. The chamber's glowing walls cast an eerie blue light on their determined faces. Lord Verix turned, his cold eyes narrowing as he saw them. "Ah, the princess and her human warrior," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I was wondering when you would arrive." Adrian tightened his grip on his weapon. "Step away from the memory core, Verix." Verix smirked. "And why would I do that? The power of the celestial essence belongs to those strong enough to control it. The weak do not deserve its gift." Zyra's voice was firm. "The celestial essence is not a gift. It is a curse. The First Dynasty sealed it away because they knew it was too dangerous." Verix chuckled. "And that is why they were wiped out. Power is meant to be used, not hidden away." He raised his hand, and his pure dominion warriors stepped forward, their weapons glowing with energy. Adrian and Sci-Fi braced themselves. They were outnumbered, but they would not go down without a fight. Verix's voice echoed through the chamber. "Kill them." The warriors charge. Fight in the ancient chamber. Adrian moved instinctively, dodging a blast of energy from one of the Dominion soldiers. He rolled to the side and encountered with a swift strike, knocking the enemy back. Zyra extended her hands, and for a brief moment, the ancient symbols on the walls flashed. A pulse of energy erupted from her, sending two soldiers crashing to the ground. She gasped, staring at her hands. The power of the celestial essence was responding to her again. Adrian blocked an attack from another warrior, barely avoiding a sharp energy blade. He fought back with precise strikes, using his human strength and combat skills to his advantage. But there were too many of them. Verix stood at the center, watching with amusement. "You are fighting fate, princess. Surrender, and I might spare your lives." Zyra glared at him. "I will never let you take this power." She reached out towards the crystal sphere, hoping to activate it again. But before she could touch it, Verix lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. A shockwave burst through the chamber. The symbols on the walls flared. The crystal sphere pulsated. And then, everything changed. Visions of the past. Adrian and Sci-Fi found themselves standing in an endless void of light. The battle, the chamber, the soldiers, all had disappeared. Before them stood a vision of the past. The First Dynasty's rulers, dressed in golden robes, stood on a massive floating platform. Energy crackled around them, shaping the very fabric of space. Then Adrian saw it, the celestial essence itself, a swirling vortex of raw, unimaginable power. The rulers of the First Dynasty tried to contain it, but the energy was too unstable. A great explosion shook their civilization, tearing their cities apart. And then the vision ended. Adrian and Sarah gasped as they found themselves back in the chamber. The battle had paused. Even Varix looked shaken. Zyra's voice trembled. The celestial essence, it cannot be controlled. Adrian nodded. The First Dynasty tried, and it destroyed them. Varix clenched his fists. No, they failed because they were weak. But I will not fail. He turned toward the crystal sphere, determination burning in his eyes. I will unlock its full power, and I will reshape this empire in my own image. He reached out and touched the crystal. The essence awakens. The moment Varix's fingers made contact, the chamber erupted in chaos. A shockwave of energy burst from the crystal, sending everyone flying backward. The walls of the ancient ruins cracked. The floor beneath them shook violently. Adrian struggled to his feet. He's awakened it. Varix stood in the center of the chamber, his body glowing with raw energy. His eyes burned with blue light, and his voice echoed with unnatural power. The celestial essence is mine. Zyra's heart pounded. No, the power is too unstable. It will consume you. But Varix only laughed. He lifted his hands, and the very air around him began to bend and twist. Stones floated, energy crackled, and reality itself seemed to distort. Adrian knew they had only one chance. He grabbed Sarah's hand. We need to stop him. Now. Zyra nodded, determination in her eyes. They charged forward, ready to face a battle that would decide the fate of the entire empire. The chamber shook violently as Varix floated in midair, his body glowing with raw, unstable energy. The celestial essence surrounded him, bending reality itself. Stones levitated, and strange cracks in space flickered like shattered glass around him. Adrian and Zyra braced themselves. They had seen what this power had done to the First Dynasty. It had consumed them, wiped them from existence, and now Varix was making the same mistake. Zyra took a deep breath. If we don't stop him, he'll destroy everything. Adrian nodded, gripping his weapon. Then we end this, together. The power out of control. Varix laughed, his voice echoing unnaturally. You don't understand. I have become the celestial essence. I will reshape the galaxy itself. He raised his hand, and a wave of pure energy blasted toward them. Adrian pushed Zyra aside just in time, rolling away as the attack tore through the stone floor, leaving a smoking crater. Zyra's eyes glowed as she focused on the ancient symbols still faintly lit on the chamber walls. The First Dynasty had sealed this power once. Maybe, just maybe, they could do the same. She turned to Adrian. We can't fight him directly. The power is fueling him, but if we break his connection to the crystal, he'll lose control. Adrian glanced at the crystal sphere still floating at the center of the chamber. Its light flickered, pulsing like a beating heart. That's our target, he said. But Varix wasn't going to let them reach it. With a flick of his wrist, stone pillars erupted from the ground, cutting them off. Then he hurled another blast of energy toward them. Adrian barely dodged in time, the heat singing his armor. He gritted his teeth. We need to move, now. Breaking the connection. Zyra sprinted toward the crystal sphere, dodging Varix's relentless attacks. Adrian stayed behind, drawing Varix's attention. Come on, Varix, Adrian taunted. If you're so powerful, why are you afraid of a mere human? Varix's eyes burned with rage. You are insignificant. He sent a shockwave at Adrian. But the human warrior braced himself, using his strength to push forward through the attack. He gritted his teeth against the force, refusing to be thrown back. Meanwhile, Zyra reached the crystal sphere. She could feel its energy, pulsing wildly like a living thing. It was unstable, its power spinning out of control. She placed her hands on the sphere and focused. The ancient knowledge of her people flowed through her. The first dynasty had left behind secrets, ways to seal the power before it destroyed everything. She closed her eyes and whispered in her native language. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. Varric sensed the change. His eyes widened. "No," he roared. He turned to stop her, but Adrian tackled him with full force. The impact sent both of them crashing to the ground. Varric's energy flickered for a moment, his grip on the power weakening. Zyra took her chance. She channeled the ancient energy, activating the seal. The crystal sphere pulsed violently, then exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The fall of Varric. Varric screamed as the celestial essence was ripped away from him. The floating stones crashed to the ground, and the reality-warping energy around him faded. His body trembled as the power abandoned him. Adrian rolled away, breathing hard. "It's over." Varric fell to his knees, his once glowing eyes now dark and empty. "No, this power was meant for me." Sarah stepped forward, looking at him with sadness. "You were blinded by it. Power like this cannot be controlled. It only destroys." Varric let out a weak laugh. "Then, we are all doomed." The ruins trembled one last time. The energy they had disturbed had begun to collapse the chamber. Adrian grabbed Sarah's hand. "We need to get out of here, now." They ran toward the exit as the ancient structure crumbled behind them. A new beginning. The ruins collapsed completely, burying Varric and the celestial essence forever. Adrian and Sarah stood at the edge of the forbidden wastes, breathing heavily. The twin moons of Zenthera shone down upon them. For a moment, there was only silence. Adrian finally spoke. "So, we just stopped an ancient power from destroying the galaxy. Not bad for a day's work." Sarah smiled. "And we did it together." She looked toward the horizon, where the golden towers of her home stood in the distance. "The Empire will need to rebuild. We must lead it to a better future." Adrian chuckled. "You mean you will lead it? You are still the princess, after all." Zyra turned to him, her golden eyes filled with warmth. "Not just a princess, a warrior, a protector, and I will not do it alone." She reached for his hand, and Adrian took it. Together, they walked toward the future, one built not on power, but on hope. And this time, nothing would stand in their way. The end.